Unapologetically Gangster, the Don Kawand story. Book 1, Story 2, subtitle, Marlboro and Coney Island. As a child, living in Marlboro used to be a lot of fun until we was no longer able to ride our bikes through the projects. And we could no longer play stickball after housing put some orange paint at the bottom of the buildings, covering all of the home plates we used to play with. And someone thought it would be a brilliant idea to use the grassy areas that we once played baseball and football in as a vegetable garden. Therefore, most kids, if they are not kept on a tight leash, will become drug dealers, drug addicts, or gangsters. Most kids growing up in the projects are taking care of themselves only because there are no fathers around and the mother has to work to put food on the table. That makes for an ugly recipe for a child being nurtured in a cruel world. Now, I wasn't always a person that people considered an inspiration. I was once a young, naive black boy being raised by a single parent. Mama love was all I had in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. Marlboro Projects is where she chose to raise me. Everyone I met, whether good or bad, influenced the character that everyone calls an inspiration. But before that, I was a very bad boy, growing up in a very bad situation. Before getting into how I became a well-known and respected gangster, let me explain the environment that nurtured me. First, let me set the record straight. Marlboro and Coney Island are two separate neighborhoods, so let's get that straight. But at times, ran through the mean streets of Brooklyn and behind them bars as one. Both hoods are a part of Brooklyn, which most New Yorkers have visited at least once in their life. Coney Island is a landmark area. It's known for its infamous amusement park, beach, and Nathan's, an internationally known hot dog spot. People throughout the city consider Coney Island and Marlboro as one. Only those that dwell on that side of Brooklyn separate the two. It is an insult to reference those that live in Marlboro as being a part of Coney Island, and vice versa. Coney Island is also referred to as CI, and although it is a fun place, also has multiple projects, private houses, and individual skyscrapers. Most of the kids grow into certified gangsters, hustlers, and bosses. The hood is within strolling distance of the amusement park and beach. Like Coney Island, Marlboro is also within stepping distance, but from a different direction. The hoods are separated by a small bridge on Stillwell Avenue. Marlboro is technically located in Bensonhurst, or what they now call the Gravesend section of Brooklyn. Marlboro is located straight up Stillwell Avenue, a street that begins in Coney Island. It goes right past Marlboro and my old building, 2227 Stillwell Avenue. A lot of action took place around in that address, involving me and them racist boys in blue. There was also a lot of mob activity because Bensonhurst was a place that the Italian mafia called home. The Gambino family and other mobsters had wedding receptions and parties at local reception venues. There was one spot on the corner of Stillwell Avenue and Neptune Avenue. One day while watching a documentary on the mafia, I discovered that they even murdered someone that lived on Stillwell Avenue. There were even mob hits by Sammy the Bull Gravano, an infamous hitman for the mob boss John Gotti. True story. But anyway, Marlboro is only one train ride from Coney Island on either the N line or the old B line, or just 5 long blocks away from Coney Island. Therefore, those that consider Marlboro home also share the same luxury and access to the amusement park and beach. Just like CI, Marlboro gave birth to nothing but gangsters, hustlers, and bosses. The only difference between the two hoods is the population. Marlboro Projects is a single project with 28 buildings and surrounded by nothing but Italian. Coney Island has multiple projects, skyscrapers, and private houses that are surrounded by water, but both are uniquely isolated from other black hoods in Brooklyn. Every gangster that has run the streets of NYC has at one time or another rubbed elbows with someone from these two dangerous hoods. I'm going to let the clowns that beg to differ in the two hoods debate what I'm about to explain. But real G's know no one is in a unique position to pay homage to certified gangsters from my side of town and throughout Brooklyn like me. Check my rap sheet. No one represented that side of BK like Don Kawand, a nickname I'd earned the hood way. Most considered me the enforcer, the godfather, and the most notorious gangster of my time. Most of my friends and I grew up gangster.
Trust me, there's nothing wrong with being a gangster. We live being a gangster, live going up that way. We changed our life, but he was gangster. Okay? I mean, for real.
Said my big bro Jay at one of my birthday parties while giving me a toast. We made it out the hood. Love you, boy. But before I evolved into a spiritual and positive man, once was a violent young man. The character I grew into played a major role that brought the war between the two hoods to a halt. I'm going to explain the position I played in making it comfortable for cats from Marlboro to chill in Coney Island without incident and vice versa. Not the amusement park area. I'm talking about deep up in the gritty streets of the hoods. It was not safe for someone from Marlboro to be in CI and vice versa. The dislike between the two hoods was deadly. This is the end of Story 2, the Don Kawand story. Unapologetically Gangster, the Don Kawand story. Book 1, Story 3. Subtitle, Marlboro and Coney Island. Everyone knows of rough hoods in Brooklyn, such as Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, and East New York, just to name a few. But it's time to pay homage to all of the original gangsters from the west side of Brooklyn, at least the ones I ran into. And I ran into plenty of bona fide gangsters. Most, if asked, would consider me a gangster, hustler, and a boss. Some consider me a living legend. I accept them all as a badge of street honor. Although raised in Marlboro projects, I also represent CI. Some might say that no one had a hold on that side of Brooklyn like me and my dudes. We were about that bread, popping them things and pulling up in foreign whips draped with expensive jewelry anywhere in NYC. First, let me explain to you about being a gangster. There are levels to the lifestyle. A gangster is fearless. They are respected and feared by hustlers. Their name ring bells. Real gangsters got a knuckle game and a gun game. I believe only those that ran the streets in the 1980s are considered original gangsters. This is how I see it. In the 1970s, most black men got their shine off of pimping beautiful women. Being a pimp was big in the 70s. And before that, in the 1960s, most black men were revolutionists. The struggle for black people's civil rights in this country was a priority. Therefore, I consider the 1980s generation of young black men the original G's. We were trying to survive during the decades of 1980 through 1990, aka the crack era. Everything after that is a product of that era. I say that because we didn't have music videos and gangster rappers to idolize. No one from that era was inspired to become a gangster. The streets were rough, and if you wanted something nice, you had to take it. A nice jacket, jewelry, designer glasses, and even your sneakers. You could have your sneakers taken right off your feet in the early 1980s. At least that's how it was in Brooklyn, and only the strong were able to survive. This is the only group of kids over time that can be referred to as an OG. To be considered an OG, an original gangster, you had to have a knuckle game and be willing to bust that gun. I say that because in 1990, the easy access of military artillery, such as AK-47s, M16s, and high-powered guns, dictated a person's street cred. In the early part of the 1980s, it wasn't that easy to cop a man killer, let alone something that powerful. Between 1980 and 1985, you had to use your hands to keep preying wolves off your ass. Having a knuckle game back then is what defined a young boy's gangster. Most dudes that got into my personal space later on in life might not know that my hands were up to par. Being bow-legged and short with no siblings made a young boy prey. Lily Crawford, aka Mama Love, was the first to influence my gangster. She was the first G in my life. Mama Love was a gorgeous and petite redbone that always told me,
"Boy, if you can't handle the streets, keep your ass in this house, you hear me?"
She always encouraged me to use anything as a weapon to defend myself. Mama Love was not the type of mom to run outside when I got into a scuffle. Therefore, I was on my own when on the mean and cruel streets of Brooklyn, New York. Unfortunately, my generation didn't grow up with the luxury of video games, computers, cell phones, and hundreds of cable channels. Outside was the only place to be. Being a 10-year-old kid with no older brothers or sisters when we moved into Marlboro Projects put me in a position to fend for myself. I was just an innocent young lamb amongst wolves. The rough kids in Marlboro would shape and mold me into becoming a certified gangster, someone that parents told their kids to stay away from. This is the end of story 3, the Don Kawand story, the realest life story ever told. If you believe you can get out the hood, click like and share, cause someone needs to hear this.
Boy, if you can't handle the streets, keep your ass in this house. You hear me?